also, what a great segue into talking about a work that Ron has mentioned that was really recrafted in a way to imagine our body, right? Reimagined. And sometimes we have to ground ourselves in all forms of activities to remember it's not just me being at a book club, but it's me being in conversation in honor of all those that came before me and after. And depending on where we are in our lives, how that even exists in community, right? So, so beautiful. Let's talk about it. But before we even delve into the book, I'm curious, did anyone watch Lovecraft Country, and or is anyone familiar with the articulate racist H.P. Lovecraft's work? Yeah, please jump in. Evelyn, I saw you were like, I definitely did. Any thoughts or any reasons that get you excited to come to book club and read this work today? I'd like for us to share.
I'm a child of, I'm a child of that era. It seemed that everything that I saw reminded me of my childhood. The time that it was filmed, the 50s, 60s, it just felt good because it brought me back to what I remember, my memories.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's real. Anyone else? Is anyone familiar with H.P. Lovecraft? Has anyone read his works? I know that when I started to watch Lovecraft Country, it made me go back and read. He has very, very short story titled On the Creation of the N-Word, right? And like, you can read it. I don't even feel right sharing it in the chat, but you can definitely find it and read it on the internet. I would say it's about 6 or 7 lines long, and it pretty much explains the psyche of someone who's taking something that is really, when we think about science fiction or those terms of otherworldly, we're naming the divine, we're naming things we don't know. And it's so interesting when you take someone like H.P. Lovecraft to take something that's so godly and turn it into this horror, like this war. And as Evelyn mentioned, during the times in the 50s and 60s, while these things are happening, white writers all over the United States are formulating and creating later works that we see in the 70s, right, in the 80s, when we see the horror bloom of folks like Stephen King and Clive and Dave Strawborough, right, and seeing how that sort of affects how we see ourselves in these stories. What do y'all think about that?
Yeah, it took me reading Octavia Butler, which, now it's like, it kind of sucks because that was the only, I guess, example that I had, because if you look at, I loved watching science fiction, so I didn't really get around to reading much of it except for Stephen King, just because he was so popular, but very rarely were we written in there. And so, I never really thought of myself as in the future, and kind of like what we were talking about last week. Was it last week? But just being written in something that like you have no idea what the future looks like, centering, Blackness and in the future, what does that look like? And we still, to this day have a hard time looking at that, especially when like, with all the talk of Black futurism and all of that. But of all the, what do you call it? All of the science fiction that focuses on minorities or Blacks still seems to have this oppression as the middle part. And that kind of sucks, because I'm like, I would hope in the future that maybe somewhere we can get away from that, but I don't know if such a thing is possible. I don't know.
If I can jump in, I think it's a lot better now. I think we have more choices. When I was growing up, I was so excited. I used to watch Star Trek, and to see Nichelle Nichols on Star Trek. I mean, I didn't realize it as a child, but that is what hooked me. And it was just exciting whenever she got more lines. But I couldn't articulate that as a child. It's kind of like you just, you react, but you're not having a conversation with any anybody about it. It's like, then when I'd go to school, oh, did you see, Lieutenant Uhuru last night? And then recently I just read a story that it was an interview that she was going to quit because she felt like she wasn't getting enough lines or enough, visibility in the show. And she was at church somewhere in the South, I don't recall. And it just so happens that Martin Luther King's bus that he was on broke down by her church. So they came into the church to rest, get in from the heat while they were getting the bus fixed or something. And he walked up to her because he recognized her. Oh, you're Nichelle Nichols. And she's looking at him like, how do you know who I am? And he says, oh, my daughters love you. And so she had made an appointment for that Monday to speak to Roddenberry. She was going to quit. And she told him, well, I'm going to quit because I'm not getting this. And he said, oh, no, you can't quit. He said, because of you, my daughters can imagine themselves going into space. And he felt something empowering for his daughter's imagination to be able to stretch. Like it's almost as if our imaginations just went up to here, and then he saw the possibility that his daughter's imaginations was able to stretch. And then from then to now, and the end of that story is she did keep that appointment with Roddenberry, but she demanded more money and she got it. But from then to now, to have people like Jewel Gomez, Octavia Butler, Samuel Delaney, Stephen Barnes. I mean, there's so many names now that I grew up, there were no names. It wasn't until I got into college that I discovered Delaney, Dahlgren. I think that was the first, and then Jewel Gomez, Gilda Stories. But I was pretty much a grown woman before my imagination could stretch. It's just kind of like I had been in acceptance of just not being there in space. We're just on Earth. That's it. Except for the aliens in Star Trek, the Klingons.
Right. Can I just, my geek nerd heart is so warm right now. And I really appreciate you, Fern, because I feel myself deeply in that. And I understand the sense of relatability. And Captain Aurora is actually one of the only OG Black characters in Black Body who actually get to exist in space as Vitasha named without having this forced story of oppression and then dealing with aliens. You know what I mean? Like, she's not getting hosed in the face and then having to go save the world. And it was a connectivity and a sense of escape. I know I seem very young, but I'm really 109 years old. And trust me, I've watched all old Star Wars. Stephanie can attest. She's a very good friend of mine, and she knows how deep I am in the culture. So, that's such a beautiful point that you're naming. And I hear your story, and I see Vitasha deeply in saying that, like, what does it look like for us not to come from that and to reimagine more and more? So that's really great. Anyone else want to jump in?
I watched Lovecraft Country and I knew the history of the writer, did not know the story of the specifics of the book. And I was kind of confused. Like, there was so much going on. I mean, I could wrap it together and I can kind of follow along, but there was a lot going on, in the telling of this story. And I was almost wondering, like, did they bite off too much in trying to tell so many stories in the one?
That's a great point. And is that a method of those sort of fantastical stories? Because I feel like even in a Game of Thrones or something, you read a Game of Thrones and, like, this is off the Richter. Like, I don't know what I'm really reading half the time. And I wonder if the book is written similarly. You know what I mean? So that we see that. Vitasha, you took the mic off. Or am I? No, you can turn your mic back on. I thought you were gonna say something.
Well, not. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it's okay. So that's a great point. Did anyone else feel that, like, confusion a little bit? We're gonna jump into the book, I promise, but this is a good landing point for those.
I actually like the complexity of Lovecraft because it kept your mind thinking. And it was challenging. It was challenging with the different storylines and the challenges that were being presented to the characters. So for all of you that saw it, Ruby, and having the challenge of choosing, what is it that how are you defining power in terms of the transition? I don't want to ruin it for anyone, but she kind of goes through a little transition, and she's really, I don't think she realizes at first she's presented with a choice, and it's another character that kind of causes her to see that you had a choice here and you made a choice to go right. You could have gone left, or you went left and you could have gone right. And then it's layered with each character having stories that, kind of, I don't want to say define their behavior, but it kind of, influences their behavior and how they see things and how they act. For those that have seen you, Michael K. Williams, I think that's his name. It just seemed like his character had a lot of secrets, and it was so much going on. It was almost as if there wasn't even time to reveal all the secrets. So for me, the idea of keeping the viewers thinking, I like to be challenged. I'm not a lazy viewer. I tend to turn to something else if it's too easy for me to figure out. And I felt like that every character had a story, and each story was complex, and you had to discover it. You had to work for it, and I appreciated that.
Oh, Fern, I know you don't know me, but you're my TV soulmate, I believe.
I got popcorn.
Yeah, okay, let's get into it.
Oh, I wanted to add to that real quick. But like
Please.
Fern, I totally agree with you. It's so, and HBO has it so bad. It's so frustrating to watch the shows because like what's the other one? Watchmen. That was another good one.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
was so compressed that it's like, come on. But it's almost like it's still that same kind of story where like, ooh, we don't know what this is gonna look like, especially with a black lead character. So we're gonna keep it as short as possible just in case. And even with like Watchmen, you don't know what it's going to look like. They're still talking about, even though it was very successful, they're still talking about they don't know if they want to go ahead and do a season 2. And I'm like, you're kidding. And I feel like
not gonna do it.
they've decided not to.
Yeah, they're not. They're definitely not.
Oh man.
Okay, I'm done for the day, y'all. Have a great day. I'm over it.
Have a good night, Bob.
But you know what's interesting? I was talking earlier with one of the book club members who watched Watchmen, and she didn't know it was a comic book or animated series before it was on TV. So when all this kind of science fiction was introduced, she was thrown by that because she didn't bring the history of the Watchmen. The HBO Watchmen series to the program while she was watching it. So it can be kind of like, I didn't know the history of Game of Thrones before I started watching it, and I posted like on social media something like really stupid, if you know Game of Thrones. Like there was like a ghost in the Game of Thrones, and I was like, what ghosts in Game of Thrones? And people came for me, like you got to know the history of this TV of the books. If you know the history of the books, then there's like supernatural and science fiction and everything mixed in it. But I didn't know that. I thought it was just like King Arthur and Knights in a Round Table kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, but
there we go.
Yeah.
And with that understanding, I think it then helps us dive into then stories and books like this, where we're taking what we know to be, for example, in chapter 1 for Ballad of Black Tom is set in Harlem, 1920s. Mm-hmm. Taking a setting that we know and then throwing that unexpected curveball. Yeah. So, how did folks feel reading this? Any words that stuck out to mind? Any sentences or phrases? I love phrases. I'm a phrase kid. I love words. I love the good grouping of like what stood out to you when you were going through this.
it did feel simpler in its storytelling. Not to say that I need simple stories. It seems like that's a theme I'm talking about tonight. But in the beginning, anyway, until he goes to that home in Brooklyn, the story is relatively straightforward in its telling.
Right.
So for me, what I appreciated about this, but I'm not sure what this means, that the main character, Charles Tester, there's a lot of rich imagery in terms of the language, but for him, the imagery is on his person. They describe the writer describes the clothes, his brown leather brogues, his fine fabric, the gray flannel suit, the hat, the guitar case and everything, but they never describe the inside of his dwelling. Every place else that he goes inside, it's described in detail. And then when he's outside, it's described in detail. So it made me wonder, what's it like inside of his house? And I don't know if that's something, because I only got up to chapter 7. Is that going to come later, and why are we getting it this? So I always, for me, I'm always looking at structure on how the story is being told. Why are we being led into it this way, that we're focusing, on his appearance, which, the guy does reveal he's a storyteller, he's an illusionist. So that's part of his persona. But I just found that interesting.
And
Anyone else?
it does feel like, even though the HBO series and this book are not written by H.P. Lovecraft, there's a similar feeling in the descriptions of the sets and the scenes that makes you, at least made me feel like they were inspired by the same person, H.P. Lovecraft. Particularly, I can't remember the guy's home that Tester goes to the first night in Flatbush, and he kind of gets stuck out there. But the descriptions of that home felt very much like how the homes in H.P. Lovecraft are presented. These really big, grand rooms of mystery, and one room kind of like is connected to another room, and you don't know exactly, where each room is going to.
I agree. That's an HP-esque tone, or a Lovecraft tone. And I do see that. And apparently, I saw that this book is based off of Lovecraft's story, The Horror at Red Hook, which is about Brooklyn, as well. So I think sort of naming that, and apparently in that short story, it's like a detective. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. Please jump in if you are. It's like a detective, and something happened to the detective while he was working on site at this thing in Red Hook, and he developed, I guess it would be like a phobia of large structures or buildings. And then in the story, it goes on to describe kind of like how he has to navigate that fear, and then it ends in death, and you're not sure which way he went. And it's like that, very similar. So it allows me to assume the setup for this book is going to, and it's relatively short, right? Yeah.
What struck me, if I may, was the writing about Tommy on the train. And I could really relate to that experience, because working downtown and having to take that train back home at night, and I would always try to stand in front of a white person, because after 86th Street, they got up. If they hadn't left by then, that's the stop that all the white people were going to get off. And so he had the opposite experience where after a certain time, all the white people on the train were looking at him, you know, what are you still doing here? This is not your territory. You should have gotten off way back. So as I was reading that, every time he was, you know, on the train and he, you know, he was questioned by the conductor, people were looking at him, and it was like, wow, isn't that something? I remember the opposite. Whenever we saw a white person that didn't get off by 125th Street, it was like, you lost or something?
Oh, bendito, how I wish for those days. I don't be getting no seats, and I live all the way off the second to last stop on the D, and the white people be right there in my seats. Like, wow, okay. So I definitely see, yeah, that was really interesting and relatable part.
What year is it? And the book, it takes place in like the 40s, right? Or something like that?
No, it was the 20s.
The 20s, okay.
Yeah, it's like 1920.
1924.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, even though, you know, the author doesn't describe Harlem, I got a warm feeling from Harlem, you know, and the relationship between Tom and his father. And, you know, I just thought that was great. And going out, Evelyn, going out to, I went out to Bensonhurst and Red Hook, and people walking down the street, people would look at me like, what are you doing here? You know, and the hostility that I felt. So I related to that also, you know, so.
And there's a lot of hostility in this book, racial hostility. Almost every time Tester travels, he runs into some situation, either when he goes out all the way out to Flatbush or even in Harlem, you know, police or police in quotes, or some kids are chasing him or following him when he goes out to Flatbush. When he's on the train, the white men are asking him what stop he's getting off, you know, all kind of craziness.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of racial hostility.
Right.
Yeah, I was shocked when I read about how he was in Queens and how whatever, it threw me off because I mean I don't know anything about New York. I've never been there. But so I'm guessing at some point Queens was white?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
well, some parts are still white, you
Yeah,
know.
And-
well, that
and
was considered
Brooklyn.
Long Island. If you moved to Queens, you were in Long Island.
Oh.
We have some ambassadors from Queens that they can explain.
Like Forest Hills. I mean, I don't know, you know, that was white for a long time. I don't know if it still is. So.
Even the
I'm actually
area,
from Queens, born
even
and
the,
raised in Queens, and the stop that he was referring to is near me, so I'm very familiar with the stop. But it's funny because it's not white at all, that stop. I mean, of course, we're not in the 1920s, but right now that whole area is Asian descent. Like everybody in that area is Asian. I mean, it's very mixed, but predominantly Asian. So it was very interesting to see that because I actually read it twice, and I just kind of said, what? Like, that doesn't make sense. But, you know, then I'm thinking, okay, you're not back in 1920s reading it. So I'm very familiar with the area that he was referring to when he was traveling to Queens.
The same, I would say the same thing is true about Flatbush, Brooklyn now. That's a Black Caribbean neighborhood now.
Yeah.
But probably back then it was Italians and
Yeah.
other
Every,
ones.
I think it's fair to say within New York City, within the 5 boroughs, that Queens in particular, because of its landmass population, but all of us have experienced white flight within neighborhoods. We see it a lot in 68 too with Queens, and everybody, you know, and I know in Hollis it used to be mad white Italians, and then they all in 68 kind of made that move due to white flight. And I think it's fair to say of the 5 boroughs, like in present day, the interchangeable of like the socioeconomic standard also meets the gentrification, because we're also naming these areas in Queens that are facing, that are what we understand to be Black and brown neighborhoods that are now facing like a new sense of intrusion, right? So this is like before whatever sort of narrative of Black and brown people taking over in certain parts of these neighborhoods. So shout out to Queens, South Side, Hollis, Jamaica. I live my life. I know I look young. I'm 109. You guys keep forgetting me. I'm gonna remind you. Because you're gonna be like, wow, she has such a baby face. She's talking like she was here. I was somewhere. No, I'm joking. Okay. So what else stood out to folks? What is the deal with the building?
The building?
Mm-hmm. That he goes to in Red Hook.
Oh, the Robert Sudan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know, something illusionary, magical, something crazy. I can't even explain it.
Right? Something is going on there. Why do we feel that way?
First he goes to the old woman's house.
Mm-hmm.
What is it, Ott or something like that? I can't remember the name.
My aunts or something.
My
Yeah. And then the next day or next time he goes to this big mansion. Yeah.
And
So she's in Queens and he's in Brooklyn, or I can't remember.
No, he's in he's from Harlem.
No. I'm saying the old woman is in Queens or Brooklyn.
The old woman is in Queens, and the Sudam,
Yeah.
he's in Flatbush in
Right. Okay.
Martin Street.
Mm-hmm.
And what's the significance? So Testa goes out there. It looks like he's hired to find a book and deliver it to this woman, but the book is missing a page or two, like the last page. And I thought it was like a number book at first, but it doesn't seem to be something as simple as a number book. It must have some kind of mystical or magical powers to it. And
Yeah, I think Tom took the page.
The last page, he did.
The last page
Gave
was
the woman the other, and I think she was mad, and then the white man was angry too because it had magical power.
Yes.
I'm not sure if Tom knew about all of that magic, but yeah. Right.
Oh, he knew because he deliberately had his father, who could not read, pull the page out, because if you read it, then you were caught up in this spell, whatever it was. So he didn't want to he knew the power of the book, and he didn't want anyone to really have the full power of the book. So he did that deliberately. And he knew what he was doing because he arranged for his father to do the deed.
Yeah.
The Supreme Alphabet Book is what it was called.
Oh, as I never named this, but I'm sure y'all know, please feel free to take the books out and do some reading now if you want. We can do any structure, you like. If you feel like, oh, I'm not sure what they're talking about, let us know what page you found it on.
I'm a little confused because he told my aunt that he got the book from Victoria Society. Then we find out he had never been there because he had imagined that it would be all these cutthroats. He gets in there and it's just people, neighborhood people, West Indian people hanging out. So now, well, again, I'm only up to chapter 7. So then now I'm wondering, well, where did he get the book from and how did he know to take out that last page? So that part, for me, it's like I'm left in the dark here. Like things are happening, things start escalating, but I'm still trying to find this, where did the book come from? Where did he get that book from?
I thought the book was already in his house, like on his father's bookshelf. I could be mistaken.
Oh, well, okay, then I may have missed that. I'll have to go back
I didn't
over
pick that up.
because I'm paying attention when she asked him where did he get the book from, and he tells her, and he says, and I wouldn't suggest you go there, you wouldn't be safe.
Yeah.
So and then when he's taking his father there, I'm like, oh God, they're going to this place. Why is he taking his father there? So I'm getting worried, and then they go in there. It's just
But
just a social club.
there's something about that place because she wants to go there. You know, even though he wants her, he still, my aunt still wants to go. Like there's something
Like there's
there.
something drawing her, you think?
Yeah, something
Like
has
luring her?
piqued her curiosity. Like, you
Oy.
know, so because she must be in the spirit world, or, you know, delving in that occult sort of mess. The Victoria Society, at least that's whatever that club is called.
Mm-hmm.
So it must be something greater going on there than we're let on to when he takes his father there. I mean, again, we're still early in the book, but that seems like something's gonna jump off in that space that won't be good. And plus, it's a lot of West Indians, and anytime you portray West Indians, you know it got to be something spooky going on, some kind of voodoo.
Well,
No, you stereotyping.
Hang on, I'm
No, no.
hang on.
He's trying to get a rise.
Stereotypes now.
He doesn't
No, no,
believe that. He
I'm
doesn't
just
believe that.
talking.
He's just trying to get a rise.
No, no, I'm just
Uh-huh.
talking about how they usually portray West Indians in books.
Yeah.
So usually when they put West Indians in books, my family's from Barbados, by the way.
Okay.
They usually setting us up for some kind of voodoo witchcraft stuff. You wait and see. I haven't read ahead, but you wait. I called it.
I feel like it's gonna be true now. We're all gonna read it like, damn, Ron said it. Why'd they do it like that?
That's how they set you up, though.
Mhm.
But Harlem does seem like a very vibrant place. You know, you get a sense of like activity and life. You know, particularly like when my family came to this country, they settled in Harlem, and you know they still talk lovingly of Harlem. So you do get that sense.
Mhm. That also seems to be thematic, or to be in the idea of the ode to Lovecraft, or that Lovecraftian-esque sort of, you come from this light, you come from this vibrancy, particularly when we see the retelling of our stories in Black and Brown Body. So you come from all this light and then you get pulled into this like lurid darkness, and we're not quite sure, again, in Lovecraft's thing of like behind which door, behind, you know. So I'm excited to see where LaValle takes. Also, I'm so Bronx, because when I saw this person's name, I went, oh, Victor LaValle, like who's that? And then I started looking into it and I was like, oh, LaValle, okay, got it. So I wanted to share that. But yeah, LaValle seems to kind of be doing that as well, right? Like trying to set us up in this vibrancy to kind of push us into this darkness too.
And the writer is Victor LaValle is from Queens also.
Ow.
Yeah, for the Queens crew.
Shout out. Barbara's lead.
His wife is Emily Roberto, the Searching for Zion. That's his wife.
Got it.
For those who weren't there, we read that book about a year or so ago. I
Yeah,
guess.
that's right. I remember.
Yeah. But people didn't like it, but
yeah, I was like, did we even finish?
Barely. We barely finished it.
It was a long read. It was
Lydia,
long.
no.
It was a tedious read. But yeah, so they're a married couple.
Wow, feels exhausting to marry a
Ron be
writer.
knowing the tea.
Two writers.
Knowing what?
Ron be knowing the tea.
Yeah, Ron got the tea on the her book was not liked that much, and a little bit like
What's he gonna do? It's not liked.
So is anyone particularly, you know, oftentimes, again, I want to bring it back to a point that Natasha had made earlier, when we think about science fiction and the relationship between telling this otherworldly story and Black body, it always comes with the background of like Jim Crow and slavery and civil rights. And like we kind of have to be set up in these periods in order to be able to tell the story. And then you look at someone like Octavia Butler that kind of shows us how to lean into the other parts of ourselves. Is anyone excited for what we see happening with Tommy? Right, that's his name, and our main character. Is anyone sort of here for the setup? Does anyone feel like I feel like this is going to be maybe some of the things I've seen before in the past of like using the idea of like whatever is happening in the 1920s racially to sort of motivate the storyline? Like, where do we feel like this is going to go?
Well, I read the rest of the book, so I can't. I'm not gonna talk on it. But you know, so I have mixed feelings. You know, I mean, in the beginning, he's just like a 20-year-old kid, you know, who only knew 2 songs, you know, couldn't play, you know, and he was a con man, sort of like,
he's a con
you
man.
know, but he was, you know, I figured he was cute, you know, he's a cute little kid, you know. But then as I, you know, continued with it, there's more to it, so I won't say any more about that. I just wanted to say that, you know, there are some up and coming. I mean, you know, of course, I love Octavia Butler, but younger science fiction writers, Jemison, and I'm very bad with names, but who are talking about, you know, who are talking about us, you know, and it's a diasporan kind of thing, because there are some from Nigeria, there's some from the United States, from Caribbean, who are talking about us in the future, you know. And so, I mean, that's very pleasant to me, because I love science fiction. But, you know, like other people said, I was always wondering, well, where am I, you know? But this is, it's becoming a little different, you know, so.
Yeah.
We tried to read, we didn't get a good turnout for it, but what's her name? Dealing in Dreams. She's from the Bronx.
Lilium Rivera.
Yeah, thank you, Lydia. We
I was
tried
sad
to
that book didn't take off.
Yeah, it was an attempt to try to get like younger readers and the parents, but it didn't take off, so we had to cancel it. But yeah, there are younger writers writing, you know, sci-fi, which is a good thing. So
yeah, pushing us out.
Paula, I want to see what's going to happen with the father. His father did give him the switchblade, and his father tore the page out of the book. Yeah. So I want to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, because he's holding some semblance of power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, is he only 40 years old?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like he's real
41.
old, but
yeah.
41. Yeah.
They describe him very old.
Mm-hmm.
Like what's her name? Who we read a couple months ago, where she made the characters so old.
Kim Joy Oku.
Yeah. Even though they were kind of relatively young in age.
But he was weathered. I mean, he was 41, but I think it's his life's time of construction that made him a lot older than he really is, right? So he made a couple points of that, like just
plus he's dying, right? He's ill.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that in the 1920s, just before the Depression hit, you're talking about the lifespan, the life expectancy of anyone, never mind a person of color, didn't really hit 50. 55 was it, especially for men. So, and then a Black man who had to work so hard. So he was maxing out on his life expectancy at that time. Today, we see ourselves as, you know, 60, 70, we're still vibrant. We're going to live another 20 years. But that wasn't the case back in the day. So, you know, the advances that we have in medicine, in vaccines, hopefully, you know, we're seeing that working out today. But you know, if you live past 50, you were old.
And the mother. Go ahead, Natasha.
Oh no, I was just saying that was just so sad to me about the mother. Was she drop dead at 37?
Mm.
Yeah.
My Lord, I lived a rich life. Thank you.
Wow, yeah.
I was watching 60 Minutes a few weeks ago, and they said that like in England or Europe, they expect half the people to live to be over 100 years old.
Uy,
Wow.
it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
I mean, just because of how we take care of ourselves and medicines and medical care, we're living way longer now. Yeah, so Evelyn, what you said is true.
I happen to be a gerontologist, so I just had to
Okay.
throw that in.
Hmm.
And I'm old too, so.
You're not alone. Me too.
I expect to live to 100. Yes, I took one of those how long are you gonna live tests in one of the magazines, and it predicted 100. So
Oh, great.
you know.
Evelyn, I'm telling you, girl, I'm 109. You could do it. I'm like,
That's okay.
Just as long as we have quality of life. Hey, the years don't matter so much. It's just the quality, and
And I believe to that point, that's LaValle's point. That's why he writes the characters in that way, to kind of also show us what is the quality of life for a 40-year-old Black man or a 30 or a Black woman in her mid 30s. How does that quality of life then lead to their lives and how they get to move in that, and what is old, and how many, that is not a solitary experience of the Black body, right? Like we can look within words, within our own communities, within our families, within ourselves and our own ancestors and elders, and even within ourselves, and kind of understand, oh, that's an expectation mostly, which is why it's also really great to see LaValle then put that sort of weary body in this otherworldly experience. And what does that ultimately do to the character? Only Kagiso, how do I say it?
Kagiso, yeah.
Only Kagiso knows, because Kagiso read the book. But we're gonna figure out what that kind of does. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
There was something in the book that I didn't understand. So when Testa is back in Harlem and a cop and some other guy walk up on him, they grab him by his collar, and they know that he's visited this woman, and they know that the last page of the book is missing. I didn't understand, like that felt supernatural to me. Like I didn't get, like, how did they know that? I don't know if I missed something.
Well, he wasn't in Harlem yet. He had just left the guy that gave him the $200.
Right.
And they were trailing that guy.
Right.
And they happened to come across Tommy.
Right. But how did they know about the book? Because the book was like
a magic book. It's a secret book. And as they said before, as we named before, someone is keeping tabs on that because it has a lot of power. It kind of reminds me, oh, sorry, y'all, because I know not everyone saw Lovecraft, but it kind of reminds me like in Lovecraft when something goes missing with Ruby and Dee and the police kind of show up, and it's like, how do they know that this is missing? You know what I mean? So I believe whatever sort of evil powers we see in a lot in sci-fi and fantasy, like, think about Indiana Jones, the moment that they disturb the tomb, like the spirits know, you know what I mean? And I kind of feel like that's what's happening here with that.
Yeah.
I went into like 6 different plots of other things.
You came back home.
Barbara,
were you gonna say something, or did I just see you wave your hand?
I actually was interested in the fact that they kind of described him, or I kind of thought that he was described as a distinguished gentleman in the beginning of the book. Although he's only 20 years old, he's like distinguished. And I don't really see a 20-year-old man as distinguished. But in this case, I had a visual description of it when I was reading the book. But then when they mentioned that he has a lack of talent, and then On chapter 5, I thought this line was interesting that I'd like to share. That Robert Sudam, I think that's his name, said, or kind of described him. I don't have the page, I'm sorry, but it's on chapter 5, and it says, "The veil of ignorance has been set over your face since birth. Shall I pull it free?" I thought that was a really heavy loaded statement that he said. Like Paula said, I'm not quite sure what's going on. I kind of got put off a little bit with the whole house and him touching his feet touching the ground, and then his legs becoming longer. Like, I was really thrown off by that. So I really don't have anything to add to that, but it's kind of magical and illusionary and stuff. But he was speaking about how he saw, or how his vision of Tommy was, right? But then he goes on to say, "I could see you. I too understand illusion." So I don't know. It's very kind of, he's a distinguished gentleman, but then this man kind of sees through him and says this. I mean, I think this line was amazing, but it was just kind of also in your face line to say something to someone about your ignorance. It just shows all over your face since birth. I mean, I thought that was pretty loaded. But yeah, I just wanted to share that.
But Paula, just like you were asking that question earlier, and then Barbara brought it to my remembrance, when you were saying, well, everything we've read or seen before, it's like that whenever Black people are involved, it requires some kind of oppression. And to me, when he said that, that's what that reminded me of, like, okay, here we go again. Shall I remove the veil from your eyes because I'm distinguished and I'm more enlightened than you. And then even when he brought up the thing about your people and their predicament, or I forget how he worded it exactly, and how, the writer put it in a way of like, he didn't mean it to be, I guess, I forget what the main character's Tesla, what is his name? The main character was expecting the guy to be smiling. Yeah. Yes. He expected him to be smiling, but he was really kind of perplexed by, you could see the look on his face as if he was really questioning, oh, your people and da-da-da-da-da. And I was like, here we go. You know what I'm saying? Like, to me, that answered the question for me. Yes, I do feel like this is going to be, and of course I haven't read any further than that. It's going to be that whole, oh, okay, well, because he's Black, he's going to be limited, but he'll then get to see the future and be on the same plateau as these illusionists, or these more spiritual people. And he'll probably go and look back at his people like, wow, we really don't know anything. But I hope to be proven wrong.
No, I know. Yeah, I know what you mean. And when I hear Barbara read the line out of the context of everything that's happening on the page, I actually then get to kind of hear what you're saying, Vitasha, which is, I actually see and hear the line is like, oh, you think you understand your existence in a certain way, even your oppression. And I'm about to lift that veil off and show you kind of like your power. And I also may be projecting the last episode of Lovecraft. Who knows what's happening in my little hyper mind. But I do know that it kind of pushed me to think, oh, maybe this is a reimagining that isn't going to dwell and kind of drown us with that, like, oppressive understanding of what it is to be Black. Also, I wanted to name the distinguished gentleman part. I don't know why I thought of this, but that line reminds me of I don't know if anyone watched back then, not that long ago, Boardwalk Empire on HBO with Steve Buscemi. Really, really great show. But it's like, it takes place in Atlantic City, but it's this similar time frame, mid-20s, early 30s, right? Dripping into the 40s in the last final seasons. But so when I heard distinguished gentleman, I kind of thought of a gangster, or like a hustler, even the con men. Like, you couldn't really tell. I joke with Stephanie about it a lot because we used to watch it together. And I'm like, oh, I would have been caught up, because everyone is coming to you suited up. So you make the assumption, oh, this kid is a gentleman, or this person's a gentleman, they're distinguished. And then you kind of pull back those layers. So I thought that was really great that you brought that up, Barbara, because it made me think of in my mind, distinguished means sort of a, I don't know, I get like a hoity-toity tailcoat thing when I hear distinguished, you know, and it really is sort of more of that like swagger. You don't really know what I got going on, you know.
If I may,
you know,
Natasha, I hadn't really seen it in the way you described it, and I can see that. But when Barbara was, when I read it, and when Barbara brought it to our attention, I was thinking almost like the Matrix. Do you want the blue pill or do you want the red pill? You know, that's how I was thinking. Like, you know, buckle up. You are going to be educated now. Your eyes are going to be opened. And do you really want to go down that road? And so it was almost as if the illusionist was trying to decide, should I be part of this young man's education, or should I just let him go? But I never really saw it in terms of the oppression. I saw it more, are you worthy of what the truth that I'm going to share with you?
You know, it's interesting. I didn't think about that either in terms of the, I mean, I remember that veil line, and it was powerful for me also. And I also didn't think about it in terms of oppression. And I guess maybe I didn't think about it because I feel like he was sought after by this illusionist, right? Like I feel like he was brought there because there's something within Tommy that he wants to tap into, and that there's going to be this acknowledgement of Tommy's like full power, right? Because like even at that moment where he opened up the library door and, you know, whatever the guy's name is,
Malone.
Robert, yeah, he opened the door and he saw Malone, right? And Robert Sudan was like, what do you see? What do you see? You know, like almost as if he was trying to defer to him, like, you know, like he has some type of key, or he has something that he's trying to tap into that maybe Tommy is not really aware of just yet, right? Because at that instance, it made me feel as if there was something that Tommy could do or see or have access to that the illusionist or whatever, Robert, was aware of, that Tommy wasn't aware of quite yet, you know? So it's interesting to hear the various perspectives. I can see them all. I can see them all. So I'm curious to see where it goes.
But you know, I think Robin is a trickster too. He's a trickster. So I'm not going to say any more about that, but he is.
But I feel like Tommy, I don't want to say Tommy's a trickster, but like
no, not Tommy.
No, I know you mean Robert. I know you mean Robert. But this whole thing about Tommy being distinguished, and for a 20-year-old kid, I think he knows a lot, right? Like I think he's seen a lot. He knows a lot about the streets. He's a con himself. The fact that he, as a 20-year-old kid, you know, has decided that he's taking care of his father, like there's a wisdom within him as well, right?
Right.
I'm curious. And who read the whole book? Who's over here giving spoilers?
I did. That's why I'm trying to be quiet.
So
you know, but you know, with Tommy dressing up, but that's the way Black folks were, and still are a little bit today. But you know, you would always want to look sharp. I mean, you know, you'd go to work and you'd have your work clothes on, but if you walk in the streets, you know, hustler or no hustler, if you're going to church, if you're going to do this, you're going to look sharp, you know. So you're going to look distinguished, you know.
Back then.
So that's part of the culture to, you know, say, yeah, we are important, we are beautiful, you know. So that's going on for a long time, you know. Just going against what the white society thought of us, you know. We are clean, we are sharp, we are smart, etc. You know. So, and when Robert said that to Tommy, I took it as an affront too, because you know, I mean, he doesn't need to say anything about Tommy's intelligence or integrity or black people. He doesn't need to say that. It was sort of like a superior kind of thing he was pulling. So
strategically to lure him into.
No, because I think he
he's also
believed that. I think he believed that because there, you know, a lot of white folks who believe that we are less than, even the smartest of us, less than, you know. So.
And it's strategy on their part to engage with us to make them feel more superior, or whatever that sentiment is, right? Barbara, what are you gonna drop on us? What gem was you about to drop?
I was gonna say, I think he's also trying to kind of like what Ms. Johnson said. He's trying to make him understand, okay, I'm superior to you. However, I still feel connected to you. The other thing I was going to mention when Lydia was saying about his character, he is a hustler. So he's going to act the part, dress the part, and be the part. But this guy, Robert, has other things planned and for him. One interesting line in chapter 1 is when he does the whole book thing with the yellow book. He says, a good hustler isn't curious. A good hustler only wants his pay. So he knows how to play the part. He might lack talent. He's very aware of his position. He knows he even goes there. He's like, he's really wants me to play. Like for what? Well, what does he want me? So he's very aware. And then I mentioned, someone else mentioned something about only knowing 2 songs and stuff. So he's very aware of his position, but I think he also plays the part. He's playing his part right now, but I think he's may not be ready for what Robert has in store for him. I'm not sure, but that's what I'm kind of guessing.
But he also should have known something was up, because who would hire him to do a gig if he only knows 2? He's not that good of a musician. So
right. He did. Yeah, he did
he
say
should have
that.
been suspicious.
But he said
about,
he was suspicious.
But about going out
he did
there.
say that.
Yeah, but going to a neighborhood where your life is almost, on the line.
He wants that money.
$500.
He wants that money. Come on.
All he's thinking about is the $500.
That's what I thought too, the money.
Right.
Yeah.
Because he even said, my dad made $900 in a year.
Yeah.
So for $500 in one night, supposedly one night, he thought it was one night, but it ended up being 2 at the end of that chapter. Yeah. And it ended up being 2 going into the next night. He lost the $100 to the cops or whoever stole it. But now even $400 is still, a great amount of money.
Is worth crossing borough lines in 1925.
Yeah, at some point he said, was it? I don't remember the payment that he received for the book. Was it $100? And he said he had enough money to pay for rent for 6 months.
Yes.
It was stretching. I was like, what?
Yeah. Yeah.
I can maybe buy 2 or 3 books, with that. It's not going too far, but I thought
this is 2020. That was 1920.
Right.
My dad came to New York in 1929, and he said, I remember him telling us how he used to pay $12 a month for a 5-room apartment, but it was a cold water flat. So they used to move a lot because in the summertime, they would get the cheaper ones. And then for $15 a month, he could move into another apartment that had heat. So that was, they moved every season they moved, but the rent was very cheap. Of course, they couldn't even afford the $15 a month. They used to rent out all the rooms to everybody else who was coming over from Puerto Rico, from the island. So having a 5-room apartment was a gold mine. But yeah, rent was cheap. So was food. Everything was. But then everybody was poor.
Yeah. So crossing that borough line for that tremendous opportunity, no matter how suspicious. And if this is your job, this is what you do. I can imagine someone like us would be maybe a little more inclined to be like, do I really need to do this? But, or maybe not, it's a pandemic. Let me not even talk for myself, okay? But if you have this opportunity to come across, Stephanie's laughing at me because if you have this opportunity to come across something else, also looking at all of your sci-fi series that you've ever engaged in or saw, or any sort of fantasy novels you've ever read, the character kind of always has to make that choice against their logic. I think it allows you as the reader or as the audience or as the viewer to then suspend your disbelief and be like, oh, okay, we doing this? Okay. Like, and you kind of sort of, you don't really question that judgment. And I think then that also speaks to that line that Barbara brought up about the man saying to Tommy, like, you don't even know about your life. Like, you have no sense of presence. And that speaks to that, Ron. Like, even like, yo, you don't even know enough to know not to come here. You know what I mean? Yeah. Which is super creepy. We have 10 minutes left. Wow. 9 minutes left. Wow. Where'd it go? I just wanted to presence us in that. And yeah, talk about anything you wanted to, Fern.
I just wanted to bring up one thing about the father, that the father gave him a razor, but he also gave him a song. And he told him it was conjure music, and his mother taught it to him. And we didn't see that come up in terms of the song, at least up to chapter 6. So I kind of feel like that's the power that he might step into, something from like his ancestors. So I'm hoping that comes back around, because I was thinking this is going to come up at the party, but then when you get there, it's, you know, he tells them the party is the next night. So I'm waiting to see for that to come. And he says, I got one more song for you. One more song you should learn. It's old, but it's got something to it. You understand what I'm trying to tell you? The razor is one way I want to arm you. The song is the other. Your mother taught it to me, conjure music. We'll practice for the next 3 days till you've got it. So to put that much effort into giving this to his son, I felt like there should be some power into it. So it's got me waiting for that revelation.
Some sort of familial legacy or something connected to that understanding. Look at y'all writing science fiction.
Yes, that's just like Lovecraft with the whole tattoo. What wasn't tattoo? Was it the birthmark, the inherited?
Yes.
Yeah.
That whole idea of him not knowing he's related to the oppressor in those ways, and like what's really
right. Until the time is right, of course.
Until the time is right. And I wouldn't be surprised if LaValle went in similar direction, because again, and you know, talking about how if part of, I think this beginning steps of like redefining our futures is reimagining whatever the oppressor owns is actually ours. And you see that theme in a lot of different shows, TVs, movies, films. And it's really great to kind of feel that emphasis. And I agree with you, Fern, like this idea that something is coming to our character that is, you know, maybe he can't even handle the fullness of that, would be connected in my mind to like our oppressor and taking what's theirs, you know. Ooh, I'm about to call Ava DuVernay. No, I'm going to come direct this. Any predictions for what we're going to see in the next couple of chapters? I love predictions. Clearly, as you see, I'm like a TV plot nut. So I'm always going to ask if you think you have any predictions. If you've read the book and you want to give us a prediction, Ms. Johnson, we would love that. Any predictions about what you think we're going to find in these chapters, besides maybe perhaps a little bit more understanding of what that last page is? The last, or the page in the book. It's the last one, right, that he rips out?
Yes.
It's the last page. Okay.
I don't know. I think it's a little surprising. To me, I mean, I liked it, but I was a little disappointed. I just wanted a little bit more. But, you know,
don't give away
but I think he tries to redeem himself. Tommy tries to really redeem himself and redeem people. I
Don't
think
give away
so.
the book.
Yeah. So
I'd like to hear more about the father. I think the father has a lot more power than he's letting on.
I'm
And
going to
he's,
be disappointed.
yeah.
Okay.
Ah!
Don't give away the book. Don't give away the book.
I'm cracking up. I would also recommend, perhaps, if you want to break from this or whatever, maybe if you can find it online, just literally Google, Ron, if you could type this in the chat for me, because this particular book is based on The Horror at Red Hook by H.P. Lovecraft. And if you're like, you know what? No, forget that guy. I don't want to read any of his work. I commend that too. Don't even trip. But if you're curious to see kind of what this is based on, and maybe after reading that, you can kind of make the connection. So it's The Horror at Red Hook by H.P. Lovecraft. And it's very short. I think it's like a page long or something like that. Okay. Any final words or thoughts, folks? We're exhausted. We don't know where this book is going, but we're excited, but we don't know. The writing is weird, but it's also very cool. I don't know what to do. I was looking at something that said that the book is written in third person close. And I was wondering, in a room full of scholars and shot callers, what is third person close? Somebody
Never heard of it.
What? Yeah, like I was like, well, I know third person. That's how Elmo speaks. But what is third person close? Ron, do you know? I was curious if you knew what that was.
I never heard of that. Yeah.
Because apparently the author is describing themselves, but with spaces in between. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. But when I was reading more about like the author's style of writing the character, the author himself describes it as third person close.
Mm.
And I'm like, what's up, LaValle? You made that up? Like, where'd that come from?
Well, clothes? Are you talking about clothes like in ropa, clothes or prose?
Como cerrado, like close, like
Close,
closing of
close.
an object. Or like the closeness of a friend. See, that's why I don't know. Is it close? Is it close? I have no idea. Like, that's what I want.
Okay,
I
so
just
I
looked
looked
it
it
up.
up. I
And
looked
it
it up.
Okay.
says close.
And
Yeah.
it's third person close point of view is tied. Hold on one second, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Third person close infuses the exposition with the author's voice and language skills while still hinting at the character's voice through their thoughts and dialogue. Whatever that means.
And
I don't know if
not a
it's a little
narrator.
bit.
That no light bulb went on in my head.
I think a little bit more simplistic might be when the text uses he, she, they, his, her, or theirs to tell a story, describe the characters and their actions, and reveal a single character's inner thoughts and emotions. This piece is written in third person close.
So it's not a narrator, but it is the main character sort of in their outward body, but then you kind of
He,
want
she,
to know how they feel.
Yeah.
Elmo in an existential crisis. I would.
And there's an
Oh my
example.
goodness.
It says in close third person, the author is telling the story about the character. The reader is brought in close to the character's perspective through dialogue and thoughts, internal dialogue, but the author or another narrator type voice is telling the story.
So kind of like your best friend would know, like not only would they be able to tell your story if they needed to, they'd also be able to maybe tell your emotion because they're close enough to you to kind of get an idea of how you felt, maybe?
Yeah, maybe. That's
That
good.
feels so good for me because I would have been tripping about this all night.
It's used to build interest and heighten suspense.
Right. And now that you say this, I feel like I saw many, many moons ago Jim Carrey talk about the Lemony Snicket character as like a third person closed character for those series because it's not the Baudelaire children and it's not them, but they close enough to know what's happening in everyone's mind. So, oh, thanks for the grammar lesson, y'all, all together. This is community. We have 1 minute left. Ron, I don't know if there's anything you'd want to share or announce before, or else I'll do a closeout with everyone.
Just that next week we're gonna be focused on chapters 7 through 12.
Yep.
Next week, Tuesday, 7 o'clock, we'll discuss chapters 7 through 12. So don't talk to Kagiso this week.
My mouth is shut. My
she
lips.
already read ahead and she's gonna give it away.
But the funny thing is, I listen to it, and it's different when you listen to something, audiobook versus reading it too. So
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much. This has been an incredible. I hope you had a fun first book club with me. Hopefully one of many.
Yeah, it was good.
I had an amazing one with y'all. And we'll connect next week. I want to respect everyone's time and just also naming, because I didn't get to do this in the beginning. As you know, just perpetuating that you don't have to feel pressure to read. You can come in saying, hey, I'm going to skim right now, if that's cool. If anyone else wants to lead a grounding, you want to share some news, we're our own community, and I want you to feel super comfy. So, feel free to get my info from Ron if you need to. If not, I'll see you all next week.
Right.
Good night.
All right, well, good night.
Ron, that was a good program on Saturday.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for
enjoyed it.
coming.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really good.
thanks.
Okay. All right. See you guys next week.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye, folks.
Bye-bye.